What defines true American grit? Is it the victory of the underdog? The refusal to quit when the odds are stacked 3-1 against you? Or is it the redemption of a hero who first had to become an outlaw and a murderer to save his nation? Forget the fairy tales. This is the true story of Robert the Bruce, a king who failed 6 times in spectacular fashion, lost his kingdom, saw his family imprisoned, and was forced to live in a cave, only to return and fight one of the greatest empires in history for freedom. This isn't just Scottish history. This is the ultimate lesson in perseverance. Are you ready for a real-life epic about a king who lost everything, became an outlaw, and then refused to quit? In the early 14th century, the British Isles were dominated by a titan, King Edward I of England, ruthlessly known as the Hammer of the Scots. His goal was absolute dominion over the northern kingdom. Against this mighty empire stood a single man who would become the ultimate symbol of defiance and grit, Robert the Bruce. But this isn't a simple tale of heroism. It's a true story of political calculation, murder, devastating failures, desperate exile, and an astonishing comeback that redefined what it meant to be a king. A story that begins not with a crown, but with a terrible, bloody mistake. Chapter 1. The Fatal Betrayal and the Hasty Crown, 1306. Robert the Bruce was born into the highest echelons of Scottish nobility, with a legitimate claim to the throne. He was shrewd, ambitious, and for years he walked a dangerous tightrope, sometimes swearing fealty to Edward I and sometimes aligning with the Scottish patriots. He was a survivor, but he wasn't yet a hero. His main rival for the Scottish throne was John Comyn, another powerful magnate whose loyalty to the English was suspect. In February 1306, tired of English rule, Bruce sought a secret meeting with Comyn to forge an alliance and launch a unified rebellion. They met at the chapel of the Greyfriars in Dumfries. The conversation quickly devolved into furious accusations and shouting. Comyn threatened to reveal Bruce's treasonous plans to Edward I. In a flash of lethal rage, Bruce drew his dagger and stabbed Comyn in front of the high altar, committing sacrilege and sealing his own fate. Historical hook. In the USA, we respect the Founding Fathers, but imagine if a key figure like Alexander Hamilton or Thomas Jefferson had to commit murder in a church to launch the revolution. That was the instant, desperate path Bruce took. Bruce had just committed sacrilege, high treason, and murder. He instantly became an outlaw, excommunicated by the church, and marked for agonizing death by Edward I. With no turning back, Bruce made a daring, almost reckless move. Just 6 weeks later, he rode to Scone, the ancient site of Scottish coronations, and had himself crowned King Robert I of Scots. This was his first major success, a crown hastily grabbed. But his first spectacular failure was waiting right around the corner. Chapter 2. The Crushing Defeats, 1306. Incandescent with fury at the sheer audacity of Bruce, Edward I sent his most seasoned generals north to crush the pretender king. Bruce, with only a small, inexperienced band of followers, most nobles having abandoned him after the sacrilege, attempted to fight like a traditional noble. 1. The disaster at Methven, summer 1306. Bruce's army was camped near Methven. The English forces, led by the Earl of Pembroke, launched a surprise attack at dawn. Bruce's force was scattered and disorganized. Many of his loyal knights were captured and subsequently butchered by Edward I as traitors. Bruce himself narrowly escaped with his life, forced to flee on foot. 2. The Rout of Dowry, late summer 1306. Just weeks later, Bruce's severely diminished band was ambushed by the MacDougals, a powerful clan loyal to the family of the murdered Comyn. In the desperate melee, Bruce fought with legendary ferocity, engaging 3 MacDougall knights simultaneously. He was so hard-pressed that he escaped only by abandoning his royal cloak and losing his legendary brooch of Lorne. His moral and physical strength were shattered. His reign had lasted only 4 months, and he was already a defeated king, fleeing across the wilderness for his life. The immediate failure. 2 major battles, 2 devastating losses. His support evaporated. Worse still, the long, painful consequences began. His wife, Elizabeth de Burgh, his sisters, and his daughter were captured and imprisoned by the English. His brothers, Nigel, Thomas, and Alexander, were soon caught and executed with shocking brutality. Robert the Bruce was alone. His kingdom was gone. His family was captured. He was a fugitive king who had failed utterly at conventional warfare and kingship. Chapter 3. The Winter of the Outlaw and the Power of the Spider, 1307 to 1308. The months that followed were the absolute lowest point of Bruce's life. He was hunted across the Scottish Highlands and Islands. He was forced to hide in remote caves and rely on the grudging hospitality of local clans, who sometimes helped out of pity, sometimes out of fear of the English, and sometimes only for a price. He was literally scraping for food, suffering from exposure and constant illness, and every shadow seemed to hide a potential betrayer. This is the setting for the famous and spiritually vital legend of the spider. The Legend of Perseverance. One day, while hiding in a remote cave, defeated and utterly despairing, Bruce watched a simple creature attempting a complex task, a spider trying to spin its web. Time and again, the spider tried to swing its thread from one rocky protrusion to another, falling down after each failed attempt. Bruce, in his utter hopelessness, began to count. 6 times the spider failed to secure its foothold. On the 7th try, the tiny creature finally succeeded in securing its first fragile strand. The turning point. Bruce took this as a direct divine sign. He famously declared, "If at first you don't succeed, try again." It was a moment of profound psychological shift. He realized that the English could take his castles, his armies, and his family, but they could never take his will to fight. The failure was not in losing a battle, but in giving up the war itself. He understood that his 6 military failures had simply been lessons, not final judgments. Chapter 4. The Shadow Campaign and the Art of Guerrilla Warfare, 1307 to 1313. Bruce emerged from his exile a changed man and a transformed military strategist. He understood that he could not beat Edward I's immense wealth and numbers in open battle. He had to fail his way to success by abandoning all his old ideas of how war should be fought. His new strategy, refined after his initial failures, was revolutionary for the time: guerrilla warfare. The campaign of harassment. Hit and run. Bruce's men, now hardened and loyal, attacked small English garrisons, supply lines, and isolated forces. They struck with lightning speed and melted back into the impenetrable hills, making it impossible for the main English army to engage them. Scorched earth. He ordered the deliberate destruction of Scottish castles and strongholds once they were recaptured. Why? To prevent the English from easily occupying and using them again. He chose mobility and wilderness over static defense. Targeted ambush. He used the rugged Scottish terrain, the bogs, the forests, and the mountains as his ultimate weapon. The mighty English heavy cavalry, the tank of medieval warfare, was useless in this environment. His repeated failures taught him the ultimate brutal lesson: fight the enemy where they are weakest, not where they are strongest. The crucial event: death of Edward I. In 1307, the tide turned decisively. The hammer of the Scots, Edward I, died while marching north to finish Bruce once and for all. This was a massive political and military break. His son, the weaker and far less capable Edward II, inherited the throne. Bruce used this essential pause to systematically regain control of Scotland, one castle and one clan at a time, patiently waiting for his moment. Chapter 5. The Ultimate Redemption, Bannockburn, 1314. 7 years after he was a desperate outlaw, hiding in a cave, Bruce faced his final, defining test. Edward II, tired of the endless guerrilla war, mounted a massive invasion force, possibly the largest army ever to leave England, to relieve the siege of Stirling Castle. Bruce's army was dramatically outnumbered by at least 3-1. This was the open field battle he had always tried to avoid, but now he had the experience, the tactics, and the belief to win. The battlefield trap. Bruce chose his ground brilliantly, Bannockburn. He used a thick forest and the deep, muddy Bannockburn stream to protect his flanks. He had his men dig and hide thousands of pits and caltrops, sharp iron spikes, in the approach path where the English heavy cavalry would charge, effectively turning the muddy field into a massive hidden trap. The charge and the victory. On June 24, 1314, the English heavy cavalry charged. They were cut to pieces, their horses crippled and their formations broken by the hidden traps. Bruce ordered his foot soldiers, fighting in disciplined formations called schiltrons, a deadly defensive circle of spears, to advance. The mighty English army panicked and fled in a crushing rout. Edward II himself barely escaped the field, riding non-stop back to England. The American parallel. This wasn't just a battle, it was the ultimate David versus Goliath victory. It was Scotland's declaration of independence fought and won on the mud of a battlefield. Conclusion: the king who never quit. The victory at the Battle of Bannockburn secured Robert the Bruce's crown and Scotland's de facto freedom. The English had been utterly humiliated. Decades later, the Treaty of Edinburgh-Northampton in 1328 finally recognized Scotland as a sovereign, independent nation under King Robert I. Robert the Bruce's story, from a religious murderer and failed king, hunted through the wilderness, to the triumphant liberator of his nation, is the ultimate example of perseverance. His repeated failures at Methven, at Dowry, the loss of his family, the desperation of exile, were not the end of his story. They were the difficult, painful tuition he paid to learn how to succeed. The broken crown he hastily took in 1306 was finally made whole and secure on the blood-soaked fields of Bannockburn. He failed 6 times, like the spider in the cave, but he never quit, and that is why he succeeded.